Hey, what's up? What's up, David? No, he and I despised each other. He did some nasty stuff to me. There he is.
Hey, Kurt.
What's up, Captain?
And I just got to try and organise this camera.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
You're low. Let me, hold on. See if I can fix my mic.
It could be because I'm just a little bit limited for space.
Yeah, no worries.
How's that?
It's as good as you can look, man.
Well, no, I meant more. I'll try and lose a little bit of the Australian.
Oh, I got it. There we go. Okay, you're good now. So Gary, my first thought was this first episode was going to be kind of like I'm going to be like I'm talking to people who have never built a model.
Yeah.
And I was going to give them some. I was going to walk through some fundamental stuff just on the tool set they should have, because to me tools are everything in this hobby, and I wanted to walk them through like some fundamental things that I have. I put a link up on the bottom of mine that has a bunch of different websites on it that they can go to, like Micromark and Northeast Lumber and Foss Scale Models and blah, blah, blah. Then I put a link to like eBay modeling tools or whatever, just to kind of point them around. I'm going to show them some of the stuff that I can't live without. And I was going to come from more of a model builder's perspective. And I was kind of wondering if you wanted to talk more about scratch building, because we'll get into that. I want to get into, for people that want to learn how to scratch build, there's some fundamental things you should probably, you don't want to scratch build your first kit.
Yeah, no, and I can also speak to the opposite end of the spectrum where, in past I've had access to all kinds of materials and stuff, but now because we find ourselves stuck here, I'm now finding my major hobby supplier is a Korean dollar store up the road that sells makeup.
Right.
That's where I get my stuff.
Well, and that's a perspective. I think it's a much more valid perspective than mine, in the sense that, I've been blessed, and I mean we've both been blessed with but I don't ever have to look around the house for something to scratch build a piece of an object. Right. I literally just go on Amazon and order it, or eBay or whatever. And I think that there's a bigger audience on your end where, hey, there's certain things around the house that you can use to that can be, something as simple as toothpicks, recognizing.
It actually gets even crazier. I know it's one of the fun things that happens now. Like here we are in Korea and no one speaks English. So I just can't walk down the road and ask, hey, have you got some clapboard? Because they wouldn't have a clue what it is. So I find myself walking through markets and stuff, just looking at what's there. And I'll show you later on. I've got a few models over the other side of the table, and I wanted to put a vent in the end of a building. Now, if I was in the US, I'd do exactly the same as you. Either go on Amazon or go to a local hobby store and buy a Grant Line, die-cast vent and stick that in, or a Tichy vent. I couldn't do that, right? But I know to scratch build like a round circle with fine lines in it, it's just in HO scale, too hard. Right. So I was in this craft store where they made, it was one of those birthday type stores. Yeah. They had the whistle. They had the whistle for, those party blowers that you blow and the thing comes out.
Right.
The noise. Well, it just so happens that the whistle part it looks like a vent. Yeah. So I went, that works.
That's exactly what I'm
part is. If I wanted to, I could run around with a building and blow whistles out of it.
All right, so we're going to kick it off, guys. For everybody here, we're going to take this in a very methodical approach. When we're talking as if the people we're talking to have never built a model. Many of you never have, but are those that are wanting to get into modeling. So I'm in Medfield, Mass. And Gary, you explain to people why you're in a port in South Korea?
Well, we don't want to take up the next 3 hours, but we came to South Korea on our way to the US via Alaska on the yacht, and we fully intended to be like on the east coast of the States now, but we got here. We got hit by a number of typhoons, did a lot of damage. Hang on, my director's over here telling me I've got a short time out.
The boss.
Yeah, the boss. But basically, we had intended to leave last year. We had the boat. We got it after the typhoon damage and the engine problems and stuff. We got it all ready to go. We packed our bags, got ready to drop the dock lines, and COVID happened. And, like we thought at the time, this is nothing. We'll just keep going. And luckily we didn't, because we would have been probably still floating around with no country willing to accept us. So we're in a position now that we can't move. Like the borders, every country south will not allow us to come in. Every border east of us, so Japan and the US, Canada, none of them will let us come. So we're sort of stuck here at the courtesies of the Koreans, and thankfully they've been sort of playing ball with us. And we're coming up, well, continually. We arrived back in Korea because we did a trip home in 2019, and we arrived back here almost a year ago, or more than a year ago. So we've been stuck here on the boat for 12 months, and that's why we're here.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So the whole yacht thing sounds sexy until you realize that you've been on it for a year. Then it's probably a little bit less sexy.
And
but
I don't know if
it hasn't stopped you from modeling.
No, in fact, I wrote on one of our blogs that probably the only thing that is a highlight for me out of 2020 and all the bullshit that's going on. Oh, hang on. Better not say that. There's a tip jar. But the only thing that I got out of last year was the fact that it reconnected me more with modelling. Now, when we're sailing full time, the only time I sort of consider modelling is during a midnight watch or something. If I'm up in the cockpit, Wendy's asleep downstairs, and you want to just stay focused on something, I'll do that. So in preparation for the trip to Alaska, because it's about 3 weeks at sea, I purchased a couple of ship kits. Not that I'm a shipbuilder, but having spent 24 years in the Navy, I was able to get a couple of kits of the ships that I'd served on. So I had fully intended to build those while I was crossing to Alaska. But then, this stuff happened. I've been at home. Our daughter was having her first child, who was a boy. So in preparation for that, because as grandfathers have to, they've got to push the love of trains onto their grandchildren. So I built, I think you saw the video of the Christmas tree layout. I did that in about a week while I was at home, and that sort of reignited that passion for trains. And I came back here, had nothing to do, and said, well, yeah, I started building one of the ships, which is a sailing ship, and it was a really crappy kit. It came from China because that's the only place I can get stuff from. So I built it, and I thought, hey, I can dress this up, and I'll build a ship module, like a shipyard module in HO scale. So hang on, I'll reach over. So this, if you can see, can you see that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's the shed for the ship, and so that is the when I say ship, it's sailing ship.
Right.
So I built that up. That goes in under it. And then I thought, well, I might as well keep going. And now we have to work this post system out because I've got to send you some stuff. The front cabin's starting to look like a model railroad room, and Wendy is coming with a big guy.
Hey, for you guys watching and listening, Gary's in a place they can't really get mail from anywhere of any kind. So his ability to introduce or order parts and stuff is non-existent, and he literally can't mail out. So that's why he's kind of stuck there. Now the shed was scratch built, yes.
Everything is scratch built.
Well, I mean the boat is a kit.
Well, the boat was, to tell you, it cost $10 on AliExpress. So you can imagine the quality, and that's $10 Australian. So that's like $6 American. It was basically a packet that came from China with a lump of wood and a couple of drawings with what looked like a Chinese restaurant menu, and it was like, oh crap, that's rubbish. What do I expect for $6?
Let me just preface this, Gary. If you could put a link up or let people know what the website is that your models and your, because Gary and his wife are keeping a blog on their trip, which is, by the way, if you want some fascinating reading, go check it out. And he's also got pictures and video. And I'm going to be very comfortable in saying this. Gary is what you in the trade we would call a master craftsman. He's an elite, top of the shelf, like museum quality modeler of all kinds. I'm more of a hobbyist modeler, but Gary is I mean, it's a true craft. And some of his stuff, most of the stuff you'll see that he's built from literally with no kit. He creates his own instructions and builds his own kits, and they're absolutely museum worthy stuff. So as we approach this conversation, he's going to be offering a very unique perspective that I will not be able to provide. So this should be enjoyable.
I think to some extent, Kurt, you sell yourself short just as I do. You know, like I look at some of my stuff and think, yeah, it's not as good as I could do it. And I think it's inherent in people with our personality. I think both of us have got the same sort of personality. Like I look at your stuff and think, wow, it's great. And I was having a conversation. I'm not sure if I broached this with you. It might have been Wendy who I was boring to tears. But you know, there's modelers all over the world, and I look at some of the guys. You know, you and I both have an appreciation for George Sellius. You know, George was the founder of, well, not the founder, but he was the master of craftsman kits.
George brought John Allen into the 20th century. Yeah,
and like I bet one of the good things of being stuck here is I get time to spend on the internet, because we have no television, because everything, if we did turn the TV on the boat, it's all in Korean, so we can't understand it. So we use YouTube and the internet as our media source. So it's given me time to chase a lot of different people, and on YouTube there's just tons of stuff. Although I was being critical a couple of days ago, some of the YouTube, even the modelers, the sailors just drive me nuts, because it's all about them and their wife flashing a button and all that sort of stuff. But even some of the modelers, their YouTube channel is becoming more about them having a cup of coffee than really modeling. But in saying that, some of them have got some really good skills, and I look at it, but everyone has their own niche, for want of a better term. You'll know Jason Jensen. Jason's got one of the most popular of the build YouTube sites. Jason's work is fantastic. Like, I really enjoy watching his, and I get quite a lot of information from him. But in saying that, Jason has his own style. Jason's model railroad is set in the same sort of era of time as what you and I like to model. But Jason tends to look at it, he's an artist by trade, and his models are almost Disney-like.
Yeah.
It's almost like the film set of a Popeye movie, for want of a better term.
Yeah.
Sorry, and my type of modeling, I get just as much enjoyment out of researching history. I love history. Again, I think we're the same.
Right.
Both war history and sort of Depression era history.
Right.
It may seem strange that me as an Australian would know more about American history probably than my own country, but partly that's, when it comes to railroads, that's because of my father. Back when he first was modelling, you know, the only thing that was commercially available was probably Lionel, even in Australia. So Australian there are a lot of good Australian modelers, and hopefully some of them are listening now. But when I was first sort of introduced as a 10-year-old, I suppose, or even younger, it was always American models. So, I sort of followed that. And then because of that, probably, as I said, one of the things I really enjoy is researching. So every structure that I build, I normally try to find a photo of a real building and something that's got character. So, and then I just go with it from there. It's just a matter of whether, I don't know, whether it's a gift or just luck, but you sort of work at it to make it look as close to the real thing as possible.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was going to say I come from a completely different angle in the sense that I was introduced to my mother and a builder, building planes. P-51 was his baby and always been my favorite plane. But I grew up at a time when Saturday was I looked forward to Saturday because right after the baseball game ended at noon, I went down to Webster's Hobby Shop and literally spent the day just walking around picking up kits. I loved hanging out in the hobby shop. I wasn't a good model builder at all, but in my mind, model building is kind of a microcosm of my growth as a human being and as a man. When I was young, I wanted the kit to get finished and be together. Now that I'm older, I want the kit to be perfect when it's done and not look perfect, but in my eyes, I've never built a kit that I've looked at and said, I nailed it, because I can find a problem with everything I've ever done. But what I found is that I now have patience beyond anything I ever dreamed I could have because of my desire to make something that people look at and are impressed with. And they look at George is a great example. When you look at George's railroad, and for those of you that don't know, George Cilios is kind of one of the four faces on Mount Rushmore of model railroading. John Allen, I would say John Armstrong, George Cilios, and you could put a myriad of others in that fourth position. But George's Franklin and South Manchester Railroad is probably like the Smithsonian's piece of work in this hobby. And he opened a company called Fine Scale Miniatures, which you can see, I'll show you real quick, on my back shelf here, all those yellow boxes, those are George Cilios kits. And
a funny story, Kurt, just not to try and interrupt. The only reason I found your HAPS site is because of George Cilios's kits.
Oh, really?
I was watching Tucker because it was
right.
Not so much, but it was compelling viewing for us, and we'd watch it. And you did an interview, it'll be a couple of months ago now, with Tucker, and you were sitting in your model room, and immediately I lost track of what you and Tucker were talking about. I said, Whitney, hey, this guy, and please don't get me wrong, I had no idea who Kurt Schilling is because baseball is not a big deal. But I said, hey, this guy's a ruler. And Wendy goes, why? I said, well, all those yellow kits are really good quality Craftsman kits. Yeah. The stuff on the right, that's Walther's kits. They're plastic. They're crap. I hope he doesn't have too much, but he's got all this other stuff. Yeah. And then I think I Googled Kurt Schilling, and it came through the HAPS when you first started, and I went, hey, this is cool. And it's funny.
That's good. I like that. I'm glad because it's another thing. This is. Modeling has carried the nerd stigma forever, just like computer gaming and all the other stuff. And now we come to realize that nerds are running the world, and it's not so nerdy anymore. I think a lot of what I do here is, I got to tell you, there's a lot of monotony in quality model building, whether it be putting rafters on a roof kit or building floorboards for something, or painting the tires for a tank, which there's 16 of, and you have to do each one into whatever. This interaction for me has been so invaluable because it allows me to kind of hang out, talk to people, like-minded people, and I don't lose focus on the work, but I enjoy the company. So I'm certainly getting as much, if not more, than what I'm giving. But that's kind of why I started doing this live. And this whole modeling thing was a suggestion of one of the viewers, Marty Griffith, who he wants to start modeling. And I thought, what a great idea to do this and to be able to talk to you and have you a part of this. Listen, I want to get started here real quick. I'm going to talk, first of all, guys, for anybody that's interested in modeling, I would tell you, and Gary, jump in whenever you want. Please interrupt me because I'm just going to keep talking. Tools. Tools are the lifeblood of the hobby. And for me, I can show you my hobby room. There are cups of files and paintbrushes, and there's 91 types of glue and all the things. I have my own little hobby shop here because I didn't buy expensive cars and a lot of jewelry when I played. I was a nerd. And so, but there are tools and tools are absolutely, they will either add to your enjoyment or take away all of the fun of doing this. And I can't emphasize that enough. And the first thing I'm going to start with, and so you'll see a link below. There's a picture of a bunch of links below here. Micro Mark is where I buy most of my tools. I'll buy them from different eBay sites, or Amazon will have some every now and then. But you can always look around and find. I model. Again, I've been incredibly blessed. I don't model with much of a budget, and so that makes me a little different, unique. So when I talk about things, sometimes I'll talk about collections of files and knives and all this other stuff. But essentially, so this is an Exacto knife, right? You cannot have, and I've learned. I'll tell you what, Gary. One of the things I've learned over the last probably 6 months to a year, I would use an Exacto knife forever, and I've started to realize that having a fine tip blade on an Exacto knife completely changes working with wood and scratch building for the precise. Yeah,
because that is like the realization. You realize that I was doing exactly the same. You'd buy an Exacto blade's probably 15 cents or something like that, but you would use it and use it and use it and go, no, I'm not wasting Exacto blades. And then you figure out you can't cut a square,
right.
And that's really the problem. If you can't cut accurately,
I learned it cutting George's cardboard. George does a lot of this stuff for his roofs. There'll be cardboard cutouts.
Yeah. And
without a fine blade, you cannot get a clean cut. I literally change my blades either halfway through or every single build. I'll change my cut because I have a jar that has Exacto blades, and I'll change out and I'll carry. So what I'll carry is number 2 or number 7, which is the fine tip blade here, and I'll keep a flat blade like this. And and the second they get dull, you'll notice, because another thing I do is I cut on glass, and because there's nothing like it. I mean, you can get a cutting board, you can get those self-healing cutting pads, which are great because they have for scratch builders. I think they're essential because they have rulers and footprints on them. You can measure and keep things straight and cut straight and whatnot. But a hard cutting surface and sharp blades are absolutely crucial. I would tell you that in the last, I was much more of a plastic modeler than a wood modeler. My military stuff is almost all plastic. So, for example, this is a kit I'm thinking about doing. And these guys are really good. This is from Trumpeteer. This is a late war P-51, and you can see now there's been this huge rush to detail in kits, especially in plastic kits. So they'll overbuild the hell out of these. There'll be 19 sprues and 5,000 parts for a kit. They could have had 8 sprues and 400 parts. But the reason this is my go-to tool. These are called sprue cutters. Basically, they're tweezers that come to a point and they'll cut flush. And I can't even begin to tell you how crucial that is, because if you're wanting to build a model and you want the model to appear at the end as being lifelike, the one thing that'll stop that is little bits of plastic hanging off your model parts. So everything I cut off. Go ahead.
Yeah, I fully agree. These are exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
I bought these. The one part of hobby model building that's really big here in Korea is the I don't know what they even call it. It's like the transformer.
Yes. Yep.
So the kids are really into it. So luckily, I was able to pick up this kit in in one of the supermarkets, and luckily it had the flush cutters, because not only is it, I fully agree with what you're saying with the plastic models, but for me, like when I'm bracing, like the inside of a structure or something like that, these just cut the time down, because I'm using, instead of strip wood, again, I'll just, that's a barbecue skewer, I'm using, they're like square barbecue skewers. And I can just cut those up. They're bamboo, so they're really, you never cut them with a knife. This thing just cuts them, and it cuts them exactly at the right size.
And that's the thing. Getting a square cut is hard too. With wood, getting a flush, flat, square cut, it's almost impossible to do. So the other tool is, this is from Northeast Lumber. This is it's literally a razor blade on a pivot. And what this does is allows me to put down. So, for example, I can put down something down here. What I'll do is I anchor something down, and I can cut when I'm cutting something. Like if I'm cutting planks for a staircase or something, I can measure that first cut, anchor down my measuring device, and just assembly line cut and get the exact measurement off of this. It's not an expensive tool, but it's absolutely, for those of people that work in wood, it's absolutely invaluable to use. But so I have so many different snippers, but these are the best I've ever had. They're still incredibly good shape. I've used them forever. Micromark sells them. They do what Gary just showed you guys. You'll find a lot of companies, Tamiya, Walters also they'll sell hobbyist kits. They'll be little tool kits, and they'll contain 5 or 10 basic tools to build models, and you kind of build off of that. But these snippers right here are absolutely crucial. Now, if you're plastic modeling at some point in the very near future, maybe even your first kit, you're going to run into what's called photo etch. And photo etch is basically, it's very thin, kind of laser cut, very highly detailed, and use what you get to cut it. You can cut it with a hobby knife, but it bends the thing, and it's a nightmare. They have photo etch scissors, and basically these are very fine scissors that will cut along the edge of photo etch and not bend the pieces. My eyes are getting a bit out of the league for photo etch, but I would recommend those. You can't have too many sets of tweezers, by the way. I have I don't know how many you have, Gary, but I've got tweezers all over my desk.
Right. We joked about this about a week ago, like these tubs, and literally when it comes to knives, I do have an Exacto knife, and I've got one spare blade left. I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but I just cannot buy them here. So I found at our dollar store, we get these, they're like a...
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. But they're really, really tough. But the great thing about these, the great thing about these is you break off, they're segmented, so you can break off at the tip, and you continually sharpen the blade as you go down. But in one night, I'll just go through one of these. But these are like 50 cents. They really don't cost a lot of money, or $1.
Yeah. So for you guys that are starting out, there's a website that I found about 2 years ago that I can't recommend enough. It's called wish.com, and it's a wholesale shopping site. And you can go on there and order sets of paintbrushes, 20 or 30 for $3. And you can, they're not super high quality, but they're useful. Same thing with tweezers and modeling tools. Wish.com is a great site for that stuff. Sign up and you can order 50 paintbrushes and 10 sets of tweezers and files for like $5 sometimes when they have the right sales. The glue. Now I'm going to let Gary speak to this as well. I literally have tacky glue, Gorilla Glue, super glue, weld bond, tight bond. I have every kind of glue you can have because I work with a lot. I work with plastic and photo etch and all that other stuff. And the reason I have so many, Gary, you can speak to why you do. I have so many because there are things when I'm working with. So I just put this together. This is a little staircase platform, and these are all little bitty pieces of wood. and I loved having I love this has a brush on it. This has a Gorilla Glue has a one with a brush, which is great for little parts, and tacky glue as well. But like, I want that to hold right away, so I'll use the tackier stuff. When you're working with heavier stuff, big assemblies, you want to have stuff like tacky glue or the Gorilla Glue. It's almost insta hold, but what you don't want to have to do is stand there and hold pieces together. And that, go ahead.
For me, I just don't have access to the hobby glue.
Right.
I've got access to, again, from this same dollar store. It's a company called Daiso.
It's in Australia, so
Yeah.
everywhere.
You would swear if you look at that, it's Elmer's glue. It's like the same bottle and everything, but it's a Korean version. Except I've never used tacky glue. I've got a funny feeling it's similar to tacky glue because I can literally.
Hey, Gary,
like this.
Gary, keep talking. I'll be right back.
Yeah. So I can use it to like glue up. This is a mock-up, a thing that Kurt and I were talking about, which is a Coast Guard building. And this glue, I was literally able to just stick the two sides together, and they stay glued. The only other glue that I would use is I've got Loctite super glue, and that's really when I'm trying to stick metal or plastic to card or wood. The Elmer's type glue just won't do that. Super glue will, but super glue has its own inherent problems. One is it's messy. Two, you end up with your fingers stuck together.
Yeah.
And you can't get the stuff off. And three, I get a slap up the back of my head because Wendy gets upset because I've dropped it on the table.
Yeah, I'll use super glue. I'm finding I use it less and less, but like on this, so this is all wood. This is the HMS Sovereign of the Seas, which at the time was the largest ship in the world. But to put the planking on for me, I used super glue with accelerator, basically because the planking was so big and so bulky that I needed the wood planks to stay to the hull. So what I would do is I would shape them and form them and bend them. And when I put them on, I would use super glue, and then the accelerator makes it instantly seal. Now, the problem is you have no room for error. So it's got to be something that you're comfortable using. But these are metal. These are very heavy metal. So you can see, the super glue, the wood glue on certain things, and you got the individual lattice work on the shipping on the front and stuff like that. But each one of these cannon ports had to be cut and framed, and that gets back to the sharp blades. If you don't have a sharp blade, this thing right here would look like something on a Bugs Bunny cartoon. I still think it looks like crap, but
this is where, again, I'm saying, Kurt, you were selling yourself short because that is a craftsman build. That's not something that an amateur would even dream of. Most amateurs wouldn't get past laying down the keel on a boat, on a project like that.
Well, the problem is I'm looking at it right at eye level, and I can see a billion mistakes. But it was the first ship kit I've ever done, and it's still in the dry dock. It clearly has a ways to go because I'm too scared to even try and take on the rigging. But
it's okay. You just paint it grey, stick a shed over it, and tell them it's part of the shipyard.
So this is a company called Model Space, and these are very expensive kits. This was I think $1,100. And what they do is they'll send you almost kind of preaching patience. You can either buy the whole kit, which I did, or you can buy the kit, and each month they'll send you a sub-assembly. And I would argue that as a beginning modeler, it would be the perfect way to go because you get 30 days to work on something and perfect the craft. And what you're going to find as you build models is that you're going to get incrementally better at building inside of one build and over multiple builds. You're going to make stuff, for me, I'm building stuff for my model railroad now, and I'll look back on a build 5 builds ago and go, there's no way I'm putting that next to that on my model. In my mind, they don't look anything alike. But that's the modeler's eye. Any good modeler, and the thing you need to remember, I think probably more important, is it is not in any way a competition. You compete with yourself for the best build, but don't look around at other people's stuff and compare in the sense that I'm not as good as him, because I'll watch. We'll talk about him later. There's a guy named Mig Jimenez who is what Gary just said. He's an artist, and he does his kits, and he has multiple methods of painting that I would never even think of doing, because I don't think they look good, but they're pieces of art when he's done with them. And so there's just so many different. But see, all this stuff right here, this is all metal lattice work, and it's a beautiful kit if it's done right. But no, so that was. I'll put this back.
Yeah, no. For anyone who is interested, Facebook has got some amazing forums, and some of them are public. Some of them you just have to put in an application and have a look at. But there are guys, funnily enough, in South America, Brazil, Argentina, those sort of places. They're just crazy modelers. They don't model railroads. They don't model ships. They just model small dioramas, and a lot of the stuff they like to do, which is sort of what I like as well, is the dilapidated. So they'll just do a 12-inch by 12-inch diorama.
Yeah.
And you look at the photos of it, and quite often they'll photograph them outside with a real sky background. You think, I can't tell that that's not real. And you zoom in on their builds and think, how the hell did they get that paint? But then I do it. That latest page that I put together on our blog site with photography, I got a new lens from China. It cost $16. Still can't believe it. But I got this macro lens, and it just suddenly it blew my mind that my stuff, when I photographed it, all of a sudden I can see all of the wood grain. I can see that. Yeah. Like I've got your problem, Kurt, with these. So you need to have it all the time you're modeling. And like I put nail holes in. I'll purposely sit there for 2 hours, like religiously putting nail holes at the end of every plank. But then you look at it and like from 3 foot away, you can't see those nail holes. But it's when you take that It's when you take that photograph, really close. That's when I suppose it's a little bit of pride. You look at it and think, I did a darn good job on it.
One of the reasons why I wanted to do this class, and I wanted to be very broad in scope, is that modeling encompasses way more than you think it does. Some of the best modelers in the world that I've seen, they don't model military, or they don't model ships or planes. They model environments. They'll model a rusted out truck outside of a broken down barn, and they'll photograph that in close. And you won't know that it's not a real life thing. And so the attention to detail, and that's what you're going to find in any good modeler. The better the modeler, the more attention to detail. The better the modeler. It gets back to the tools, right? Being able to put pieces together, and when they're done being put together, they look like they've been together forever. And that to me is that next level. You'll see a site on there for Mig Jimenez for ammo. Mig is he's a world famous modeler, very much in the military. What's up?
I just wanted to show you something.
He's very much in the military, and he has a large art background. He started his own company. He's the guy that puts out a line of paints that I would highly recommend. He's a little bit more. He's in Europe. He's a little bit more on the expensive side, but he's the one that started with the filters and the washes and the stains, and he's literally got products like so for if you're a plastic shipping, what it is you put it down underneath the base coat of paint. So if you put it on the side of a tank, you put this chipping fluid down and you put paint over it, and then you can rub a brush across and chip the paint as if it was chipped in real life. And he's got weather effects and stains and washes and all that stuff. And as you learn to paint, something like filters, which I never got into. You build up filters, you put a layer of filter on, you only know it's there. But eventually, as you build those layers up, it becomes obvious and evident, and it brings out raised detail and rivets and all this other stuff. So that's getting to the next level of modeling. But I would highly recommend his website. He has a bunch of great tools. His airbrush is, I think, the best in the business. He's got a couple single and double action airbrushes. And for real quick note on airbrushes, they are I think they're crucial for some modeling, not all modeling, but crucial for me for armor anyway. Single action airbrush is an airbrush that you just push the button down, it sprays. A double action is when you push the button down and pull it back to control the flow of paint. You can use either. The double action is more of a detailed paintbrush, but you can find cheap ones in the hobby stores. And I recommend if you're going to start, buy a cheap one. Learn the hobby, learn it, because I think one of the things about model building is there's a ton of hobbies inside the hobby. Whether it be painting or assembling or any of those things, and you can be a master at one to cover up all the mistakes of the other. Like I feel like, I have a kit right now I'm building that is absolute trash, and so my goal is to make the kit look like a quality kit by the end, and I'm only going to be able to do that with paint and detailing to a level that I haven't been able to do other stuff with. So
I think that's one of the great things too about model railroading is like I'm a modeler, but my history and past was model railroading, and I love trains. The great thing about model railroading, not only are you building the structures, you're building the scenery, you're laying the track, you're building the engines, the cars. You can buy a lot of that stuff, but you can also scratch them. So and then they get into the electrics, the DC, what's happening now, DCC and sound. But the hobby, the whole modeling hobby, to me, Kurt, you don't know a lot of my history, but I had some pretty high stress stuff while I was in the military, and also after it. I managed one of the largest motorsport teams in the Southern Hemisphere, and set that all up. And modeling to me was that thing that I could be at a racetrack. The stuff that we raced, I raced both open wheel and saloon cars like NASCAR. But I could be at a racetrack for 4 days and have all that crap going through my head. I could come home, pick up a model railroader magazine, and just be immersed in that magazine for 4 hours and just completely lose everything, thinking about modeling and what am I going to build next? And when we were living in Brisbane, I had one really good hobby store, model railroad store, Austral Hobbies, and the guy's still there. He's getting on quite old, but he has it's just one of those shops that you can go into, like you were saying. It used to frustrate Wendy. I would leave on a Saturday morning and say, I'm just going over to see, I don't think of his name, Ron, I think it was. I'm just going over to see Ron. Like 10 hours later, I'd come back. I said, what are you doing? Where have you been? I said, I was just talking to Ron. Like, we're looking at the latest. Sometimes I'd buy. Quite often, you'd just be looking at the new stuff that was coming out. Like, he was like one of the first guys that got ON30 stuff in Australia. So to me, that was like, it's fun. And I got involved in ON30 mainly because my father, his eyesight was going bad, so I started buying him stuff, like, because he was a model railroader, and sending it to him because he didn't have the funds to actually do that, but I was able to do that. But yeah, the hobby, I would implore to anyone that if you're having I'm not saying a bad day or whatever, but if you just want to focus away from all things else, just get involved in it doesn't have to be our hobby, but a hobby, but modeling, because you're focused on it. I know what you were saying, Kurt, that you can model and you have haps going and it doesn't distract you as much, but you can model away. And I'm sort of the same, although I'd like, when you're doing like fine detail, you've got to really focus on what you're doing. But I'm always, in my mind, I'm always like, when you say with painting, you're building up layers, and I'm always thinking like 3 layers in front of myself. Like I'm putting down a shingle, thinking, but I'm going to lay some construction paper over this to look like tar paper, and then I'm going to put a wash on it, and then I'm going to put some grey paint, and then I'm going to dry brush it, and I'm going to slowly build it up, and it just evolves.
Well, and I think one of the, I'm sorry.
No, you're right.
I think one of the keys is that this is as deep a hobby as you choose it to be, but I think one of the things that makes this so appealing to me, and I think to other people, and for you that are thinking about getting interested, is that there is an end product at the end of the work. and that end product is something that you're going to be proud of and eventually get more and more proud of, because it's going to eventually get better and better and better. And a lot of modeling is centered around history. And for me, you know, when I build, I have a 1/16 scale Mark IV-J German tank over there. Now, it's not just a Mark IV-J German tank. It's a Mark IV-J that has all the appropriate applique armor, all of the detail that the Mark IV, I mean, I researched the Mark IV-J. That tank has the rivets where it's supposed to be, the guns where it's supposed to be, the stowage where, I mean, that's fascinating to me. I like that level of detail. Same thing when I work with miniatures. You know, I love, you know, the Napoleonic Wars, and, you know, whether it be painting miniatures, painting the uniforms, and understanding, you know, the different legions in the French army that had different, you know, breast coats and the different banners, and, you know, all the way to Warhammer, which is you know, a fantasy or future or past. You know, there are guides and books and color schemes. You can find literally anything artistically that interests you, from modeling a landscape of a flower bed to modeling a full-scale 3 by 5 foot diagram of French paint or the world. You can get all within build. You're going to and you'll gravitate to a part of the hobby more than the other. I like building stuff. I'm starting to really enjoy painting and weathering because I feel like I'm getting a little bit better at it. And what I'm getting at the end of it is, I think, better looking than it was before. But all of this revolves around, and the great thing about it is Gary, you can sit down at your table and work for 15 minutes or 15 hours. You can, you know, you don't have to stay. There's no I mean, for me, I like to sit for, obviously, I'll sit for 8, 9, 10 hours if I can, because I just get consumed and bought up in it.
I'm there. You can probably hear the laughter in the background. Just walking over to the front. She's shaking her head, going, yeah, no. Oh, I'm lucky. We spoke about this the other night. I've got a cleaning fairy on board. She's just cleaning in the background now. Unfortunately, when I'm modelling at home in Australia, we do, although we live on the boat, we do have a house in Australia, but we haven't lived in a house for 12 years now. But all of my stuff is back there, and when I'm modelling, my room looks exactly like yours. I've got all the boxes in the background. I've got all the tools, and I've got all that stuff here. And I sort of think sometimes that maybe being on the boat has made me a more disciplined and better modeler, because after every modeling session, well, I don't clean up, Wendy does, but you know, someone has to clean up, because our boat is big by standards. It's 56 foot long, and it's as big as an apartment inside. But at the end of the day, I think I'll just tip this up. You can probably see I'm modeling on a highly polished varnished table, and all of our upholstery is white. So I've got to be really careful. But, I mentioned this the other night. Like I finally found, you know, talking about products, I can't find Indian ink here. So I bought this bottle of it's Japanese kanji, you know, the ink they use for kanji writing. So I mixed that, and they don't have isopropyl alcohol, so I had to buy, what was that stuff? Ethanol. So I've got ethanol and kanji ink, black, trying to mix it on top of white upholstery, and Wendy's in the corner going, "What are you doing?" I'm going, nothing. But it all worked out. I managed. I got a whole heap of, because I'm about to build a pier, so I was staining up a whole heap of these. Where are they? These things, which are nail sticks. They're again from that Daiso dollar store. Women use them for doing their nails, but they're fantastic for staining up. They're a little bit like bamboo. I use a lot of bamboo skewers and that sort of stuff because that's the only wood that I can get.
Right.
It's too hard to cut. It really is a hard to cut. This is a little bit softer, and yeah, they're great. So there I was staining up this stuff in my workspace, which is also our dining room on the boat, and yeah, I was getting yelled at. So I am lucky that I have the cleaning fairy. She's sitting over in the background, not coming on the broadcast, but yeah, it's the hobby. You know what I'd say to people and I've proved it here. What you're saying about MIG paints and all of that, I can't wait until we finally get to cross to Alaska and come down the west coast, so that I'll have access to hobby stores again. Because but what I've had to do is sort of what maybe when did you say in Japan I can probably get some stuff, but we can't get there neither. But I've had to improvise. So my paints, the paint that I'm using at present is this box of artist acrylics, and they're just the regular sort of artist acrylics that you buy at any art store for students. They cost like $20 for all of it. It's an acrylic paint, and it's a lot thicker than what like the folk art type paints and the MIG paints. But again, just with that and some household paints, I'm able to buy. This is a grey. It's the sample pots they have for wall paint at the hardware store. For some reason, they sell this in the supermarket. I don't know what the Koreans do at night in their homes, but they paint with this stuff apparently. But it's just acrylic wall paint, and I found that like this costs about 50 cents for that, and that'll last me until probably I'm well retired. But it's made me sort of develop new ways of doing things, and it's sometimes it's a bit of a failure. But the great thing again with the hobby, even with your scratch building, if you put a coat of paint on and it really turns out crap, as in the colours, you just paint it again, and do it again and do it again until such time. And quite often those mistakes tend to build character into the structure, because they're more layers. And you think about like the history of a building, the structures we're modelling, the stuff that you're doing at George's at present. The reality is, even if you're modelling 1950, those structures are sort of 1900s something. Yeah. So they're 50 years old. So the boards are weathered and they're old and that sort of stuff. So all of this layering and mistakes, when you actually look at the prototypical photos of what you're modelling, those mistakes are there because some clown that has never used a hammer in his life got yelled at by his wife, and he had to go out and nail up a couple of boards because they fell off, and they're as crooked as hell. So when you get your boards on as crooked as hell, like George does, where he talks a story about his building, you just need to have a story. The reason that why is that board on crooked? It's not because you screwed it up when you were trying to stick it on. It's because some fool 50 years ago couldn't nail straight.
So I want to talk about paints real quick. So there are a couple I use. So this is MIG ammo from the website. This is Model Air, and this paint is almost made for airbrushing right out of the bottle, because a lot of times when you airbrush, you have to thin your paints down. And this is Model Color. There's a ton of other paints. There's Model Matter. There's all kinds of paints. There's really, though, there's three kind of paints you'll use modeling. There's acrylics, enamels, and oils. Acrylics are probably the ones you're going to use most often. Enamels, and they dry rather quickly, easy to cover. The key is for these paint bottles, for me, has always been, it's funny because MIG ammo sells a package of BBs basically. And what you do is you drop one into these paint bottles to keep the color on the bottom stirred up in the paint. So this actually gets to another essential tool, and I'm not kidding. The bottle cap. This bottle cap will save you more paint than anything in existence. I have literally a drawer of 100 of them. And when I'm going to paint something, what I'll do is I'll take my paint and I'll drop 2 or 3 drops in here and paint. What it does, first of all, it saves an enormous amount of paint from waste. And secondly, it allows you to get an even coverage of flow. Plus, whenever my paint starts to dry out, I can dip my paint in thinner and drop it back in there and keep it wet. But there's many kinds. I use oils are basically, that's kind of, for me, oils are kind of a higher end modeler type. They're really good for blending when you're working with model figures. Somebody asked earlier, most popular scales. Modeling, it's 1/35th scale is probably the most popular scale. 1/32nd aircraft, 1/35th. Boats is 1/700, usually somewhere in that neighborhood if you're doing the big ships. And HO scale is the most popular. It goes Z, N, HON3, HO, ON3, O, S. And as you go up, it gets bigger, obviously. HO is probably the most popular scale of this. That's what this. So this building right here is HO scale. And it's just big enough that I can see stuff. Now, this tank right here, this is the bottom half of a Mark II Panzer 16th. And it's actually very, very big. And a crappy kit, by the way. But as a model railroader, scale really factors into your available space for a layout. I mean, you can put a really super nice, very detailed, big, in a sense, layout on a 4x8 if you're working N scale or Z scale. HO, you can have a nice layout 4x8. And as you get bigger, Gary's talking about ON3, which is anytime you see an N3, it's narrow gauge. Basically, smaller railroads, logging railroads, backwoods railroads would go to 3-foot gauge as a way to save money. But the narrow gauge stuff is fun as hell to work with. And my railroad is actually, the Brillo and Schuer is actually HO and HON3 is going to be what I end up doing with. But the paints you can find, again, eBay, Amazon, and it goes without saying, if you can afford the good stuff, it makes a difference. It really does. Yeah. I mean, a good modeler can make paint look good anywhere, but good paint can make up for those early modeling things that you do. You're going to find that when you brought, one thing I've learned is I prime everything. There's nothing worse than putting paint on something that isn't primed and not getting a clear coat, because you won't. 9 times out of 10. For plastic stuff, like for example, this tank right here is actually primed, and this is actually the red oxide primer that the Germans use for their armor. So what will happen is this will get covered by a base coat of camouflage paint, but as I weather it, I'll use that chipping stuff, like I said, and the coat that will show through will be the coat that showed through in real life. It'll be the red oxide that was in the armor and painted on the armor in the real thing. Same thing.
That's sort of like with our HO scale stuff. Like this is the latest thing that I'm working on, and instead of priming this, because it is actually carbon and a little bit of wood, I've stained it to try and make it look like bare board, and then putting the paint on, which is, you've done this yourself, Kurt, where you're trying to make it look like it's aged and the paint's come off. So you're slowly building up the layers. Right. And it's just a matter of, it's a sight thing, and you build it up. So my problem so far is spraying. There's just nowhere. I do spray out on the dock, much to like I get a lot of people looking at me. But the only spray paint that I can find here that I can use is an epoxy zinc undercoat. So I've used that on a lot of the cardstock paintings, and it worked out quite well. It's a grey, it's a Korean paint. Sprays on a bit thick, but what it does is leaves like a little bit of a texture. But that gives me a base for those acrylics to stick to. Right. Because acrylic is, funnily enough, I've only been using acrylics for the last 12 months, I suppose, because most of my modelling was back when Flocal was, the go-to paint, which was an enamel. You had to use, thinners and all that sort of stuff. And we used to paint everything with that, and it was hideous to smell. And I think now they've outlawed it. And I was watching some of the YouTube channels and went, wow, this acrylic stuff looks pretty good. And then I started using it. I couldn't get the stuff you're talking about, just using the artist acrylics and wall acrylics. And the finish is phenomenal. But exactly as you said, you need that undercoat to get it needs something to bite into. But as soon as it does,
I'm sorry to interrupt, Gary. One of the things that I've in the last probably 6 to 12 months that I've really, really grown hugely fond of. So you can see I've got like sponges here. I now paint all my wood clapboard and almost all of my everything else after I might put a base coat of wood color on it, but I paint it with sponge. I literally dab it. I dab the sponge in there and I dab it across, and it gives you an instant aged look on all of your wood. You can put it on as thick or as little as you want, and it, you know, so I'll do most of it with when it's assembled already. Like this wall is already aged in a sense where you can't really see it. But what I'll do is I'll put the base coat on, and before all the windows and doors, I'll just take this, dip it in the paint, and dab it across and drag it across. It's 100 times faster, and B, it gives you immediate weathering, which is very, very cool. I haven't even thought about trying plastic either. Yeah. But and then this Brillo pad, scouring brush. This right here is a way to age. You can age stuff and thin stuff down for putting on signs and making posters and whatnot. You want to make them look aged. You can take this and drag it across the surface to make it look aged, or thin paper out. If you want to make paper, some of you guys, I'll show you next week, my method for putting signs on buildings. You want them to look painted on. There's a method to it, and aging that is part of it. I want to mention a couple other quick things before we get done with this first session. Probably one of the most underrated tools that I've ever owned, and I use as much as any tool, is I know it looks like a toothpick, and it is, but it's brass. These are MIG sells them. MIG Jimenez sells them. They're brass toothpicks, and when you're working with small parts and you need to glue detailed parts, I literally will go in here and I'll use my glue, and I'll stick the brass pin in there and put glue on the tip, and you can put glue into very small surfaces that have no glue residue left over. These are unbelievably valuable. And what I do is I have this little styrofoam pad where I keep my pins, which, by the way, common house pin, that should go in the top of every bottle of glue that you have, or else you're going to be punching holes in it to use it night in and night out, and it keeps it open. What else?
Have you seen these, Kurt? Can you see it?
Oh yeah. Are those the little they have files like sand, like
no. It's like, this is a women use it, but what do you use it for? I buy it in the makeup section. It's like a plastic. I'll try and get it up there a bit closer.
Is it an applicator?
Yeah, it's like a little brush. It's just got a foam tip on the top of it, and like
when they glue jewelry on their nails.
Yeah, when they're putting. Yeah, apparently Wendy says like when the women put jewelry on their nails and
right. Yeah.
And these things are fantastic. Like for gluing, for painting, and for cleaning up, they've got just a small bit of foam. And I find most of the time, like if I'm using PVA, you'll know one of the things you don't want to do is have too much PVA glue residue because it'll be shiny. And if it's already painted, it's going to destroy that. Whereas this, I can just stick it in the mouth, clean it down.
Yep.
And then you've got to remember not to put it back in your mouth, but just wipe it off, and they're great.
Almost like this. So that's what this is right here.
Yeah, you can literally. I don't know what I've done on the screen. I've only got you about an inch wide, but yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is the
same idea. Like this bag of 30 costs 30 cents on Wish. I mean, I have those, but that's actually your applicator is what I use. But when it gets down to really fine detailed parts, like handles or locks on a tank or something, this out to be just a godsend for me. But so you guys, if you can take a shot of those links on the front there. You can find everything you need along those places. eBay's a great place, but make sure you check and cross-check Amazon. If you're looking for price efficiency, you'll be able to find the cheapest product out there at some point. If you're just starting out, I would recommend probably Tamiya. If you're into modeling cars and armor and planes, 1/35th scale is probably the safest size to start with. Tamiya. there's a bunch of different brands. Tammy, Megan is, again, if you it is. By the way, no one's paying me to endorse anything, nor would I endorse anything for this stuff. Everything I'm recommending is stuff that I've used and I've bought. I'm going to imagine Scratch Build and Gary over here is the same way. But the fact of the matter is, if you want to start with a wood kit, there's a company called FOS Models, FOS Scale Models. They offer a Model of the Month club. And let me show you real quick. So what he does is, each month, he'll send out a kit of the month. And, here you go. So, some of them will be in a little bigger container, but like, they'll be like this. Last month was, where is it? Last month it was this little barge. And then he'll set, and most of them are for model rails. Like, this is a background structure, but they're laser cut. And by the way, Larry or Gary can talk way more about that than I can. But the stuff now coming out with laser cut is an absolute joy to put. The fits are unbelievable. The precision is second to none. It actually puts the onus back on the modeler in the sense that if your kit turns out looking bad, it's not because you got a bad kit. It's because you just didn't do it well.
Well, hopefully one day, Kurt, you and I might be able to put together. We'll get our own kit out.
I think we should. I really do, and I think we could do something pretty cool.
The hobby is going ahead in leaps and bounds. Laser cutting has been around for probably a fair while, really, but to the average person, it's only been around for the last 5 or 6 years. George was using it years ago, well before any of us knew what a laser was. But the hobby, I was listening to a couple of guys. I sent you that link to Wiley's podcast.
Yes.
A couple of Boston guys, and they were talking to, about 3 weeks ago. They were talking to a guy who owns a company called Tiny Things. It's really interesting. He's a Tiny Things. I'll send you the link. But basically, he's a HO modeler, and how he got started in this whole 3D printing thing was, it's funny. He wanted, I think he said a squirrel, and no one, because he super details everything, and he wanted a squirrel or a beaver or something like that. So he went to Shapeways or someone, but anyway, it's got him into the hobby, and now he's just doing it's quite a funny listen, because the Wiley father and son team are typical Boston type people, I think, but they're funny. But then like, this guy's making some amazing stuff. And what was interesting, and I really hope this is true, that he was saying because there's a lot of modelers, like scratch modelers, who are quite elitist, and they think, oh no, this, if you start to 3D print stuff, that's not modeling. Well, no, that's not the case. You and I defy anybody, can carve a HO size squirrel accurately, because a HO size squirrel, for those who don't understand HO, it's 1/87th, which means 3.5 millimeters is a foot. So a squirrel that is, say, a big squirrel, it's 6 inches, it's only going to be 1.5 millimeters tall. Like, that is minute. And to the average person looking at a tree on the HO layout, all they'll see is a tree, but it's that photo, or the person who gets down and sees a squirrel on a branch starts to think, man, that guy did some amazing detail. And that's what he's saying. But the thing I hope is going to happen to our hobby is what he was saying. The resin printers have leapt, in leaps and bounds in the last 2 years. My son-in-law is running a side company now, making stuff for Dungeons and Dragons with resin printers. But what the difficult part is the design. And I've been trying to design some stuff, and it's just shop fronts and that sort of stuff, and they're pretty easy. But when you get to a squirrel, how do you do a 3D squirrel? And what he's saying is the manufacturers of these 3D printers understand this, and at present, a really good quality scanner is about $10,000. But he believes, and he's in the industry, so I hope he knows. He said, like, within the next year or so, you're going to see 3D scanners that are just amazing, that will scan stuff that you can then print for your model. So like you're doing a building and you want those really fine decorative posts, let's say on a veranda or on the front of an old building that have got fluted work and stuff. You just can't model that, whereas you can print it. So he's saying that the scanners are going to come ahead leaps and bounds and come down to like the $200 mark, where, you know, and that will really improve. It's not going to destroy scratch building or model building. It's just going to improve the detail that we can use, you know.
Yeah.
And the funny, this just as a funny side note, in that conversation they were having, Brett Wiley, the father anyway, he said, because this guy's got this really fantastic HO hunting dog, a pointer, like a hound dog, and it's pointing with its leg up, and he goes, how the hell did you scan that dog and get him to stand still for so long? And I'm thinking, yeah, how the hell did he do that? Like that's a real art. And what this guy said, and it hit me, is absolutely true. He said, I didn't scan a real dog. He said, I got my grandmother's porcelain hunting dog off the shelf, and I scanned the porcelain hunting dog. He said, some artist who's brilliant made a wax mold 100 years ago for that hunting dog, and they produced it in porcelain. When you scan that hunting dog and then you reduce it down to 3.5 millimeters to the foot, it's a perfect dog.
Yeah.
You know?
No, it is the scanning and laser printing and 3D printing are they're going to change the modeling landscape like the iPhone changed social media. Because everybody in the country, everybody in the world is going to potentially be their own little distributor, which is only going to make the hobby better.
Well, that's exactly how our daughter's husband and our daughter have got into this thing with Dungeons and Dragons. Terry's a game player, and I didn't realise people pay a fortune for dice. You know, the multi-faceted dice. So he's got some design skills. He actually did a course, a uni course in 3D gaming, or not 3D, but gaming programming. So he designed up his own dice, put his own logos on them, printed those out, made some masters, then did some resin casting, and they've put that on their, what is it, Alchemy Chemist website or something. And like people in the US are just at them all the time because they just did it as a side hobby, as something.
I'm a huge war gamer, and in the last 5 to 10 years, the dice have made an enormous pivot in the gaming world. You know, I can buy nationality-based dice. So, we're playing the Germans versus the Americans. I have German logo dice and American logo dice, and it's gone off the charts. And you know as well as I do, we're hobbyists. We'll pay for stuff other people will look at and go, why would you buy that? Like, we think it's cool.
Yeah.
And that's going to, in that market, that market's going to, hey, listen, Gary, first of all, thank you. I'm glad we finally did this. And if you're up for it, I'd like to try and do this every Monday when you are available.
Oh, no, I'd love to do it. And you know, because we can go, there's so many tangents to this hobby that we can talk and talk and talk. And I've got to say, I've got to thank you, Kurt, because it's one of the few times in the last 12 months, apart from talking to Wendy, that I can actually speak normal. Well, a lot of the guys listening now will not think that I'm talking normal English, but because of our accent. But the thing is, it's really enjoyable. And it looks like, especially with the way politics is going, that we're going to be stuck here for another 12 months at least, because it's just crazy.
You think so?
Yeah, well, I put a thing. This is going off modeling. I did a look yesterday on there's the Worldometer, I think it is, which maps coronavirus and the whole thing. And funnily enough, after the inauguration, wow, it's really plummeting down since they've changed the measure. But the problem is, and this is why, like, a lot of people have said to me, like friends of mine, because I write for a couple of conservative news websites in Australia. And, and people have said, why do you study or why do you worry about American politics so much? And I said, people just don't get it. What happens in the US, and we're not Americans. Our daughter is. She was born there when I was serving in Seattle. But I follow world politics mainly because that's my other hobby, I suppose, is politics. And what happens in the US affects everywhere. Now, especially Australia, we've got a conservative government in Australia, and they're more liberal than the Democrats. But the government here in Korea, we're watching it. Everything that happens, if Dr. Fauci comes on and says you've got to wear masks, all of a sudden the Korean government's going, well, we've got to wear masks because every country is looking to America. So whilst all this malarkey, as he likes to call it, is happening in America, he's really affecting the world.
Yep.
I don't on too long.
I mean, we're going to end this real quick, but that was, Gary, that was I tell people, I'm in a position in life where I've been blessed. I mean, who's in the White House is going to have absolutely no impact on me financially. None. I don't care. It doesn't matter. For me, it was all about my kids and my friends and people that are out working in the real world and understanding whether liberals like it or not, America is the bellwether. We took up the mantle after the Second World War because no one else could do it and no one else wanted to do it. And we've been leaders since then, for better or worse. We've been leaders. And the fact that we shirked that responsibility and we're now sitting where we are, it's first of all, it's 100% our fault as American voters because we were out for the last 50 years and we let this happen. So nobody to blame but ourselves. But the fact of the matter is everything that we do has a global impact. And us being energy independent was a huge deal. And now they're talking about, reverting back. Anyway, we'll talk about that another time. So, hey, Gary, thank you, man. I really, really appreciate it. Guys, those website links, take a picture of that and get a hold of those. I will, I'm going to cancel myself off here so you can see those a little bit better. Get those links, check those links out. If you're interested in modeling of any kind, you're going to find whatever it is you need. And there's so much more out there. You can find a ton of different YouTube videos. Gary, what's your website?
We have, I'll give the stuff that I'm putting the models on is Spirit of Sabroan, which is the name of the boat, .wordpress.com. Sabroan, whole history, but it's Sobraon. I'll send you. I'll go on the messenger part of the live chat, and I'll put it up there.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I can't mention it. I can't even comment to anyone. I can see Rev is saying thanks, Gary, but man, the computer's too far away. And maybe I've set this up wrong, but you and I were like 1/10 of the screen, and it's like, what am I looking at? Yeah.
You have to change it on yours. You'll figure it out at some point.
Yeah. Hey, tell me, is this camera clear enough?
Yep. More than you were fine. Everybody was talking about your audio was perfect the whole time. Mine was kind of breaking up every now and then.
Oh, okay, because I'm just using. I have got a camera and stuff that I can hook externally, but for this, I've just used the laptop.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. If you want to show your work, or if you want to show models, if we get into maybe working and talking about a build, you might want to try an external camera so you can focus on the objects and the work. So, anybody.
At one point, I may be able to talk you through a simple scratch build.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. Put something together. I think next week I might break out a model and just kind of go through the introductory parts of beginning to assemble something or whatever. But we'll have and then obviously we'll take questions. You guys, I'll post I'll give you like a 4 or 5 days notice so you can post questions before we even do the broadcast, and we can have answers ready when we do the broadcast if you have them. So anyway, Gary, thank you, brother. I'll talk to you. I'm gonna do a baseball game at 10 p.m. and hang out on hats. So I will. I'll catch up with you later. Wendy, you take care, Wendy.
Thank you. Will
All right,
do.
darling. Talk soon.
Catch you later.